if you believe the stuff you see, cause it's empirical. You find it hard to believe a miracle, but the fact that anything is here at all, that's the miracle, cause where was it before it was empirical?
As I began to teach more in secular academia, I knew that my faith was going to run into more academic questions. And so to prepare for those more academic questions, I went to a place that existed to train people to do that. Westminster Theological Seminary started back in the 1920s, and the aim of Westminster was to defend the Christian faith against atheism and liberalism. And so I knew that would be a great training for where I was headed in secular academia. But as I was there, like I said, they train you in how to presuppositionally look at a worldview and to kind of go from the ground level to deconstruct it. And while I was there, I was forced to not just look at somebody else's faith and say, if you remove this jingo piece from the tower of your faith, what happens to it? Well, I turned that lens around. And so what happens if someone were to use this this theological judo on me? If you remove this jingo piece from the construction of my worldview, what happens to it? I began to ask those more penetrating questions, and I began to second guess the answers that I was getting and the answers that I would give someone else if they asked me that same question.
He says that he was trained. You know what I'm saying, that he was anticipating getting into academia, or that he was aspiring to get into academia. He wanted to engage, I guess, objections to the faith, or, you want to engage things on that level. And so he says, he goes to Westminster and whatnot, and he was trained to presuppositionally break down other worldviews. And he said he flipped it. He's saying on Christianity, he's like, okay, what if I take that jingle piece out of Christianity? Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but I mean, particularly like presuppositionalism, that's kind of like the idea, right? Like the idea is that if you take this lens of evaluating the Christian worldview, then you'll find yourself with a worldview that can stand that test, whereas other worldviews, you'll be able to take that jingle piece and see how it falls apart. That's kind of like the idea, so it's like, it seemed as though he felt like he was doing something novel or different by taking a presuppositional lens and applying to Christianity, when essentially that's kind of the underpinning of what presuppositionalism is comparing worldviews and seeing how they stack up based upon how those worldviews are constructed. Does that make sense? Or
yeah, presuppositionalism is an apologetic methodology. There's a heavy emphasis on the self-revelation of God, Scripture as being self-authenticating in the ultimate authority, and ultimately the triune God as a metaphysical ontological reality being the necessary precondition for all metaphysics, for all of reality, right. Especially the area of epistemology, but also in the area of ethics and, as I mentioned, metaphysics, meaning every element of reality being contingent upon God. And so the idea is the Christian assumes that, and therefore where God has spoken is true, takes that into battle, so to speak, intellectual battle, and then applies 2 Corinthians 10:3-5, cast down arguments and lofty vain imaginations and all that, right? And that exalt themselves up in the knowledge of God. And then the idea is that every unbelieving worldview of any variety will fall, because it's ultimately not built upon the rock, but built upon sand. And so when the storms of intellectual rigor come, the house will fall, but the wise man who built his house upon the rock will stand.
Well, and now see, what's interesting to me though, and again, I'm taking it that, he used the word presupposition, so I'll just go with that. So when it comes to a presuppositional approach, regardless of what approach you take to apologetics, actually, it's not so much about taking a jingle piece out of somebody else's worldview and then seeing it fall.
Yeah,
okay, that's not what it is.
That's not what presuppositionalism is. I don't know what that is. That's almost like if someone's holding to what's called a foundationalist perspective and you take an element out of their foundation, but that's not what presuppositionalism is. So I don't. For sure.
So I don't know what he was referring. Right. So for example, like I might say that I actually argued this. I don't believe that. I'll just say a naturalistic or atheistic worldview has solid grounds for rationality, our ability to reason. You know what I'm saying? And I do believe that in a theistic perspective, we do have grounds for that. And that's just a simple example. Now, I'm not saying that, okay, well, if you take something out of atheism, they no longer have grounds for, rationality. I'm saying that if I'm an outsider looking into that worldview, they don't have what's necessary to ground rationality. It's not what I'm taking out. I'm saying they already don't have what's necessary. And
God is the necessary precondition.
Exactly. Right. And so any worldview, if you take a piece out of the worldview, you haven't rightly analyzed it. You just strawman it. That's really what you've done, right? Yeah. So what he described was, okay, well, if I take this jingle piece out of that worldview, does it fall apart? Well, yeah, I mean, of course, you could do that with anything. That's called strawmanning. But ultimately, what we want to do as in apologetics, or I'll just take that word out of it. If you're analyzing a worldview, it's not a matter of trying to take something out of it. It's evaluating it as it is and saying, okay, well, how does it stand up in terms of its ability to explain this or that phenomenon or this feature of reality? And like you said, I certainly affirm that that God's a necessary precondition for whether it be rationality, morality, aesthetics, and things of that nature. But I thought that was a real strange way to, if he was describing presuppositionalism, it sounds to me like he got it wrong off the bat. I'm saying perhaps he's describing something else. I don't know, but and however he described it, I'll just put it this way: worldview analysis doesn't work like that. I'm saying, like when you're analyzing worldviews, it's not okay. I'm going to look at this worldview over here, see what happens if I take that piece out. That's not good worldview analysis. And so, if how he described worldview analysis is what he was doing, and then he turned that on Christianity, well, of course you're going to arrive at some conclusion, some heinous conclusion about Christianity because you're not doing it right. You know what I'm saying? So it'd be interesting to hear him explain that further.
Yeah, because part of, I believe, for a worldview to be true, there has to be coherence. The set of beliefs over here have to be able to network and match up in some way, cohere with a set of beliefs over here within the same system. Right. Taking them out doesn't prove anything, or putting a new one in that doesn't belong doesn't prove anything, because it does the opposite of a legitimate worldview critique. And my understanding is he was at Westminster doing graduate level work, like master's level work. So
that's what he said. Yeah,
I'm incredibly confused how he is misunderstanding and or at least misexplaining presuppositional apologetics. It's not about taking out Jenga pieces. It's about saying, here's what you say your Jenga pieces are. Will it even stand up? That's kind of
and if they're teaching apologetics at Westminster, they're teaching a presuppositional approach.
Yeah, Scott Oliphant is the one who runs stuff over there. Scott Oliphant has a book, for example, called Covenantal Apologetics, and in Covenantal Apologetics, the whole book is about a presuppositional approach. What?
See, that's what I'm saying, bro. I'm like,
Presuppers, here's what they say they're doing. Now, sometimes people get annoyed by the use of this verse, but I think it applies if you're charitable with what we're trying to do with it. It's Proverbs chapter 26, verse 4. Listen to this, because everyone's heard this verse before, but watch how it can be applied. Answer not a fool according to his folly, lest you be like him yourself. The very next verse, everyone, says the opposite thing. I want to show you. Answer a fool according to his folly, lest he be wise in his own eyes. And these are proverbs, so people have understood these are things that you apply in certain situations. It's the nature of the proverbial literature. And so that's been one explanation for this, and I think that's true enough. But what apologists who are pre-sup have said, this can apply to apologetics. So the way that you answer a fool not according to his folly is that you don't assume his assumptions with him. So if he says, well, I don't believe miracles can happen, you don't have to assume that that's the case when you proceed. You don't have to, if he says, I don't believe that there can be any realities that are immaterial, you don't have to buy that assumption moving forward. So you don't answer him on what he's saying must be the case. You answer him according to a biblical worldview, but to show him how it's true. You're saying, taste and see that the Lord is good, in essence. You're trying to say, I'm not gonna buy your presuppositions. Let me show you what my presuppositions are. And now they make sense of reality. But one of the ways sometimes you have to do that is to get the fool, and this doesn't mean the dumb person. This means the person accepting essentially a non-God ordered worldview or a non-God centered worldview. or who doesn't listen. Answer a fool according to his folly, lest he be wise in his own eyes. There you say, now let me assume what you hold to be true. And let's see if we can get things like, so this is especially if you're talking to an atheist, for example, can we get value? Can we get meaning? Can we get purpose? Should we even be able to get aesthetics, meaning beauty? Should we be able to get that? Should we be able to get the laws of logic, which are immaterial, immutable, and unchanging, which is another word for immutable, and invisible, because they're not located in space and time anywhere. The laws of logic are necessary for all right thinking, and actually necessary for reality to be how it is. That way the universe can't not exist at the same time in the same way. That's an impossibility. So the law of non-contradiction automatically holds. You can't have that, but yet no one can hand you a law of logic. You can't trip over one because they're not physical. They're not located in space and time. So the other one says, answer a fool according to his folly. So you'd say, here's why you can't even have logic, for example. Or if you say, let's say evolution was true, can we get ethics and morals out of evolution? And sometimes we can point to, for example, evolutionists who say, no, you can't, like Michael Roos, who says, I appreciate when someone says this is right or that's wrong, but really that's all illusory. Morals and ethics, they're illusory. And I was a paraphrase of the quote, but the word illusory is something Michael Roos, for example, philosopher, I believe, down in Florida, specifically used. You are illusory. It's an illusion, ladies and gentlemen. So I bring that out to say that's what we would do. So Brady, with all due respect, I hear what you're saying. You're viewing it as sort of this intellectually honest journey, and you've put the guns out on the atheists and the humanists, and now you said, well, let me put the guns back on my worldview, and you killed your own worldview. You got to keep going, though. What's your worldview now? Are you turning your philosophical, theological, intellectual guns with the same rigor? Because you haven't explained fully what your new positions are, but whatever, and I say this respectfully, but whatever your Bradyism is, meaning your individual idiosyncratic worldview that you now hold to, it will not be able to hold up. It will not meet the necessary conditions that you need for all those important things in life. But here's what often happens. It gets ignored with an unbelieving worldview because there's an impracticality disbelief. And that's why David Hume said at one time when he contemplated some of these things, he said, when I think on these things, and I'm paraphrasing, it was in a somewhat different context, but David Hume, atheist philosopher, said, then I just go play a game of backgammon. Meaning, like, when I get too deep in this, I do this, I can't really answer it. I just go distract myself with entertainment. Brady, what are you doing now? And because I mentioned this illustration to others, if someone says I don't eat meat anymore, they're not telling me, most likely, they don't eat anymore. They're saying they don't eat meat. So what's the substitute for protein in your diet, for example? So what I'm saying to Brady is, you don't eat meat anymore, but what do you eat? What's your substitute? If you're not forthcoming with specifics of what you believe now, you can't play the guise or the role that you've been so intellectually honest and you're being ruthless, sort of ruthlessly rigorous. Because at the end, he said, all I've wanted to be is a portray of truth. What about what you're holding now in your deck of cards that you've given yourself?
That's going to be the clincher for me, man. Because again, like it's so early in the game. You know, we really can't. We don't know all of where he is now. You know, shout out to my wife who's in the chat, y'all. Hey. But yeah, so yeah, I mean, we don't know exactly, you know, all of where he's going to go, but it's stuff like this in this initial, you know, in his initial comments that kind of was red flags to me, because I'm like, you know, that's not presuppositionalism. Like I know a little bit about apologetics. I mean, there's different approaches. I mean, you have the evidentialist approach and so on and so forth. When it comes to presuppositionalism, they're just saying it. And at the end of the day, you know, when he talks about, you know, taking some of these questions and then turning him against his own worldview. I mean, honestly, I think that's, you know, I mean, I do that all the time. You know what I'm saying? Like I tell my wife all the time, I debate with myself 5 times before I go to the debates with, you know, with somebody else, because I do want to find the holes in my own responses. But nevertheless, to your point, though, if you abandon Christianity, then you're telling us that, you know, well, obviously he must hold to something else, you know. And I wonder if he's going to do like, in the words of Lecrae, he said, I had to doubt my doubts and let faith in. I wonder if he's going to doubt his doubts. You know what I'm saying? I wonder if he's going to be as stringent and principled about, you know, going at whatever it is that he believes now. You know what I'm saying? I'd be interested to see what he does there. Let me play this next clip.
Life is spiritual. Be before ticks or tops or clocks or watches. No one watched God operate at a rate that should equate mega millions of years. By mere words, the universe appeared in a matter of days. Matter raised from the dust, making let there be look like let there was. Yet we're stuck in the dream time. Meantime, Jesus creates and sustains us in one seamless life.